okay with the literature that you find. You will be familiar with it.
You will be familiar, but sometimes it will overwhelm you.
Yes.
It could daunt you because of all of these faces looking at you. And you can see Alice, in fact, what she's trying to do is find a way out. And what's happening is that these flowers, as she tries to step further, the flowers get larger and larger and larger. Okay? I wanted to also point to you, who's the first prize, who's the main actor? Why not Alice? The name of the film is Alice in Wonderland. Can you see how easily we've slipped into that trap? Who's the main actor? Is it Alice or is it the Mad Hatter? Who's the Mad Hatter in the story? Anybody remember? I know that you're all going to watch now Alice in Wonderland after you finish this session. Yes. Who's the Mad Hatter? Yeah. We all use the expression, don't be a Mad Hatter. What does that actually mean? By the way, I think he was nominated for an Oscar for that role. As not the main actor, but he was the supporting actor. So if he's the supporting actor, who's appearing in the front on the poster? Can you see? What we have a question about who is central and who is the Mad Hatter is actually the commentator. Commentating on the action. Because he always features, whether in the red world or the white world, etc. He's always there. He's always commenting and offering a position, putting on different hats. Okay? Mad Hatter.
So I think he's the cameo then.
Yes?
He's the cameo.
Here's a good question. I would rather say the two queens are the cameos because they represent two opposite worlds. They don't change the story. The real story is the story of the relationship between Alice and the Mad Hatter. That's my interpretation, okay, of the story. The story is, it's a relationship between the voice of reason and the voice of unreason and the voice of imagination. That's what's going on in this particular film. A wonderful film. I'm sure you're all excited to see it now. Okay? Now, let's look at it, what this means for a cameo role. A cameo role is a role, if you're citing A, person A or theory A, is there, you only mention it once. It's like a decoration on a Christmas tree that has no connection with the other decorations. Okay? It's just there because you're wanting to add it in. It's a way, and one of the ways to actually check on this is to see how many times Samuel is cited in the article, for example. And if you see that Samuel is cited, but you never actually engage with what Samuel actually has to say, he's just embedded at the bottom of a sentence. You with me? Yes. Just once off. Teacher professional development is the growth of internal journey towards recognition of self. Samuel 1998. Okay? And then we move on. We don't actually quote him at all. We don't actually use his direct words. He remains a two-dimensional person in the study. Because the person's argument is not pivotal to the development of what you are trying to make. It's not pivotal to your narration. It's there as valuable, but it's not central to the argument. It's not good or bad, but it serves a different function. It shows that you can't have a film with only main actors. It would be a rather strange film. All right? You have to have some cameo roles, some stars, some supporting actors. And therefore, it might be said that it contributes little to writer's B's argument or narrative. So if you write a B and you're just choosing the person as a cameo role, it's not going to fundamentally or change your argument. So there's different ways in which you can choose to include the literature. into the film, into the narrative, into the argument. It could be perfunctory in the sense that you're not. It's just there because you're being polite. You have to quote your supervisor. You with me? Cameo roll. Tick, done. You see what I'm trying to get at? You know there's some politics about it, so therefore you're going to include him anyway. But he's not going to add value, in fact, to your argument. With me? You can see how it works. That writing is not a neutral political process. It's a social process as well, a sociological process. It's enigmatic. We don't know why it's there to begin with, and that's often the case for poor writers, where a reference is included in the text and we don't know why it's there. It's because Michael said you have to have 200 references, so we'll find some and we'll add it in. Okay? So now note how an astute supervisor will know whether you're just using a cameo role in the way in which you're referencing. Because a good supervisor will see what's the purpose behind why you're citing this particular individual. So it's not just the citation, it's how the citation is being used to advance the argument. And therefore, as a supervisor, you need to be able to say, can we drop that reference? We don't need it. It's detracting from. Or if it's to be included, what purpose is it serving in the nature of the argument? All right. Another issue is, you often see this, the concept of the force field model of teacher professional development. Note I'm quoting all the things I only know. Okay, teacher professional development includes many different interpretations from a sociological, historical, political, and cultural approach. Samuel 1999, RB 1992, MacArthur 1996, Jones 26, etc. And we have a whole list of them, a batch of references. It's a good indication, supervisors, that the person doesn't know what they're talking about. Okay? So it's indicating that person is using it just to pad, to add impressions that you know a lot or you've read a lot. Okay? And you can see this is another way of being able to see how are you actually using the literature and what purpose is it serving. Okay. The fact that they do not quote actual words is evidence that the article has not been read. Okay? So, in draft one, you need to be able to think through, if you're just using these references as decorations, rather than as actually engaging deeply with what the argument they make, the direct quotations, by the way, usually are in inverted commas, but they could be direct references to what the argument is. It's not just at the at the end of the sentence. You with me? And so therefore, as supervisors, you need to be aware that you might be being seduced by the writer to pretend that they actually know when they in fact don't know. Okay. Speaker on.
If maybe you're reading a book or an article and the author of the book or the article states something and you want to use it, but then in that statement he says it was
So-and-so's argument.
so-and-so's statement, or maybe it's
We
a
call it
theory.
an embedded reference.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe let's say it's a theory. He uses that theory to illustrate, but then he says it was firstly stated by so-and-so.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm using that, do I use the main author, the person who wrote the
We
article?
call that the primary source. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, that's a primary source versus an embedded resource. A primary versus an embedded resource. In master's level, they would use the argument that you can go with embedded resource. In PhD level, argument for me, no. you have to show evidence that you have engaged with the primary source. And the primary source means you go back to the original person, because remember, the embedded resource is an interpretation of the individual. That's why in PhD level you're expected to go to primary sources as the main reference.
Can use the
At masters, yes, we'd say it's acceptable, but you're showing a degree of reliance on an interpretation, because you might be misinterpreting the original. But we're saying at master's level that's okay, but not for PhD level. Okay? So again, you can see the issue of all of these are signals or cues to the supervisors about how students are using references. And as I use the word, they might be seducing you to pretend that more is known than is actually known. All right? And therefore, the question is, the clarity must come through in the organization of the architecture of the argument. You can see the word repeating itself all the time. We need to know that you are on top of the literature and you are reviewing the literature. You are viewing again what it is that the literature is saying. You can use it in different ways. It's not sure if B understands A's views fully, and it's not really important. You know, they don't regard it as giving it much weight. By the way, there's nothing wrong with cameo references, as long as you understand that they're not fundamentally leading or assisting you to make the argument. They're there to act as a way of saying, well, here's the scope of the field, and here's where you're putting it against that backdrop. We'll come to this just now. It doesn't detract from the main plot. So a cameo reference is something that does not change the main plot or the argument, but note, cameos get paid a lot of money. Hal Berry, to be taking part in a movie, you are certain you can get half of the male population possibly in the room, in a black community maybe. You see, that has a draw card. There is a pulling in factor that you want to make sure. In education we say, have you quoted Jonathan Jansen? You with me? Because he's a key theorist that is writing about aspects about, let's say, policy implementation. If you've not quoted him, then something is seen as, inverted commas, amiss. Yes, sir.
Yeah, in our discipline, the guide specifically bars us from using textbooks. And you find something, and you go to the source and you find it's a book. Then it means you are stuck there because you are not supposed to use embedded referencing.
Yeah.
In that situation, how do you then counter it?
The reason for the hesitance about embedded referencing is got to do with the fact that we want the PhD student to be an independent researcher. That's what the exit level outcomes of a PhD say, that you have to be an independent researcher, not a dependent researcher. But herein lies the problem. When you are reading Foucault in education theory, Foucault is French. You're reading a translation of the French version if you don't speak French yourself. Can you see? So you have to mediate what exactly is the problem. The issue must always be, are you producing independence of thinking and critical thinking? That's what it is. It's not the object of this is a textbook itself. That's the problem. You with me in the argument. The more important issue is the researcher, the writer of the PhD, showing independence of thinking in relation to the argument that they are making. All right. The other problem with this is that if you suddenly see a whole set of individual references, know that this might be an indication that the person added the reference after the argument was made. You with me? So you write the paper and then now I'll find a reference to find this, to say that one. Okay, and then I'll find another reference for that one. Okay? You can see as supervisors, these are all cues to be able to say how often is a reference cited and why. Does that show engagement with the thinking of the reference? Okay, supporting role references are usually seen in the following way, is that we tend to see that person's name more than once in the paper. You're citing that reference in your writing a journal article or writing the chapter or whatever, you see person X recurring in that you're constantly engaging with this. More than once, there's evidence that the person understands the view that the person holds, theoretically, epistemologically, methodologically. There is evidence of direct quotations. You can see a supporting role is going into a much more detailed engagement. The person is in your face, so to speak. If you see the supporting actor in a film, she or he is in that film. You know that people will say it's not only Johnny Depp, it's also Helen Bonham Carter, who is also in this film. Okay? So they see it as two people, the two people that are engaged and as a presence. So you see the presence. They're usually direct quotation, that I said sometimes, because it's not only by quoting their words, but quoting their ideas. So don't only look to see where the quotation marks are as a supervisor, to be able to say, is the person engaging deeply with the literature? They may be engaging deeply with the literature by dealing with the ideas. And they repeatedly go back to the person's ideas and critique the person's ideas and engage with the person's ideas. That's what a supporting artist does. They engage, they support, they go back with the main arguments of the text, the main role. Now, those of you who studied literature, I'm not sure many management people would have studied literature, but I'm sure there are people who have. There's the concept of a counterpoint. If you see X, you see not X in a counterpoint. And usually supporting actors are often positioned in that particular way. So you might know an old film called Starsky and Hutch, which I see come back on TSTV recently. Good cop, bad cop. Two people trying to solve a problem, but you have two different vantage points of how to come to solve the problem. A good cop and a bad cop. So they're used as counterpoints to each other. Now, those of you who sing in choirs, like myself, will know that you have a, I do. Okay, I do sing in a choir. So you have a melody, somebody singing the melody, and somebody singing counterpoint. They're not singing the melody, but when those two things are brought together, they complement the quality of the music that you hear. Sometimes they may be in harmony, or they might be in oppositions. So you hear a male voice and a female voice in counterpoint, singing together. All right? A counterpoint. So you need to be looking at how you're organizing the literature as well. In the telling of the literature, is the way in which you're bringing in your supporting actor or your supporting citation, the way you're bringing it into the study is to be able to present an antithesis to the one that you've just developed. You've developed a thesis arguing X, and now you're developing an anti-X. You with me?
Yes.
So if you've been pulling along the argument in this particular way to say X leading the argument, you're now suggesting an anti-X. So there might be counter viewers suggest that this might be too problematic in the context of blah, 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 blah. You with me? So you're showing a full roundedness to the argument. I'm nearly done for those who are backing away. Okay? Another is an issue of foils. A foil, for example, is a person who stands in opposition completely, who is against the dominant tradition. Another role is the jester role, which might be the Mad Hatter's role. Is the jester, if you know a Shakespearean drama, I'm sure most of you studied a Shakespearean text at some point in your life, willingly or not, okay? Where you had a court jester in the middle of the play who was able to speak at all levels, whether to the king or whether to the ordinary folk, whether to the main plot or to the subplot. The jester was allowed a complete independence of thinking. That's what the role of the court jester is. The jester is usually the conscience of the author. Okay? A jester is trying to say, while all of these arguments might be true, and this person is the main person, and that person is a less ordinary person, here is a critical commentary on all of them. Can you see the role of the court jester? And that's why we might have the question of why Johnny Depp is on the poster of Alice in Wonderland, because he's the Mad Hatter commenting on Alice. Even though the story is about Alice, the Mad Hatter is on the main cover, Johnny Depp. Okay? So you can see there might be different ways in which you could position yourself as the writer. So the star citation is probably the easiest one, is that person is pivotal to the plot. It's the very theory that you are critiquing or engaging with, as central to your argument. But herein lies a problem, that it might become, last bullet, celebratory of the author, celebratory of that particular position, where you are advocating rather than critiquing. And there's a tendency where you put people too much into the star role and they want to walk on the red carpet all the time. Okay? To follow the analogy. That they become celebrities in the studies and they take over the study. And we need to be very careful as supervisors about when certain authors become celebrities. And usually in the early stages of writing proposals, students put up somebody as the celebrity. Who? The supervisor. So they choose all the writing that the supervisor has done and they add it in to make him happy or her happy. And we are involved in an incestuous process in that process of setting up. The supervisor says, wonderful study, look at me. Okay? And that's what we think is a problematic in the star, the way in which star performances happen in citations. So I think this is a wonderful analogy to be able to ask how you see the use of cameos, stars, or supporting actors in the way in which you actually use literature. And they can be used in very creative ways. So I want to conclude then with this particular quotation. The debate needs to be informed by the academic self-awareness and by a realization that perfect citation may be an unreachable goal. There is no perfect citation. That's what the argument is saying. All of it serves a purpose, as long as you are clear about what that purpose is when you're doing it. So our work will be enhanced if we are more critical about why and when we cite. That's what Hugh says in that paper. Why we're citing it and when we're citing it. And I would add in the last part, and how we cite it is also important. And all of these will give you some inclination in terms of the way in which you relate to your literature review. So concluding comment is, literature study is an exciting experience, a creative experience, an experience of growth and development and challenge. And if you get your literature review done well, you're on the track to a very good PhD study. So with that, thank you, Brian.